So a black guy and a cop walk into a bar and discuss the most recent shooting, police brutality, the war on drugs, stop and frisk. How does it end? It might surprise you. Find out. Middle America with Vin and Sori. Alright, Elio Mike, call me up, bruv. Did you get to see the latest episode of Middle America with Vin and Sori?
I did. I watched it today.
Elio Mike, talk to me. What did you think of the video? Tell me the truth. Don't soften it because we're buddies, Elio Mike.
Oh, no, I will.
Okay.
I would never do that. You'll get it straight. It's a tragedy, obviously. Nobody ever wants to see something like that happen. But it absolutely had nothing to do with race. It had to do with a chaotic situation with somebody with a gun holding somebody down with a gun, on the street. It's what we call blue on blue or blue on green, and these kind of things happen all the time in law enforcement. They happen in the military. When you have, looking at the military, when you have like two patrol units out patrolling, and one of the most dangerous things is having these two patrol units meshing, or a patrol unit coming into the perimeter of a good base. Those are some of the most dangerous situations because bad things can happen and mistakes can happen. And this was absolutely a mistake. Although, we don't know what kind of information the officer had going in. We don't know what kind of description he had, possible gunman. We don't know. There's lots of unknowns at this point of like what his state of mind was coming into that scene. And those kind of things matter. And you really can't compare like that situation. I know you compared in the video to the white guy who had the red flag order put on him. You cannot compare those two situations. Every law enforcement situation is completely different. When you have different circumstances, different officers, different agencies, different states, you just can't compare them.
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing, Elio Mike. The problem is that I keep seeing all these examples. Did you ever see that example in California where that guy in the... Well, I'm about to tell you. The example of a let me ask you this question, Mike. If there was did you see the discussion about Miami where they were using black folks as target practice?
In what way? Like you're talking about on paper targets?
Did you see that video? Well, it was in the video.
I guess I didn't go that far in. You're talking about paper targets with black people on paper targets?
Right. It was in South Miami Beach, and then in 3 months later, after that got exposed, there was a black guy in the street, and he was down with his hands in the air, and the cop shot him anyway.
Right. I'm not denying that terrible things happen, but there's multiracial paper targets. If one agency was using only black people targets, yeah, that's messed up. But we use paper targets of all stripes. With don't shoot targets. They're varying colors and varying clothing, and but pretty much nowadays, though, most modern departments will just use the silhouette. They don't even use actual printed, faces. And
well, my brother, this was 2016.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying it was the right way to go.
Well,
I can't.
Hold on for a second. So
decisions can be made, but sure.
So they're using silhouetted targets of African Americans, and then they shoot an African American male while he's on the ground with his hands in the air, completely unarmed.
Okay.
Are you saying race has nothing to do with that whatsoever?
I don't know this situation, but what I'm saying is, given the exact same facts, if that was a white dude, either not complying or doing or whatever caused the officer to shoot, I'm saying that he would have just as likely shot if it was a white guy.
Well, if you'd have watched the video, the man, Mr. Kinsey, turned to the police officer as he was being carted off. He said, "Why'd you shoot me?" And the cop said, "I don't know."
Okay, well, he didn't know. Right. He probably screwed up. He probably had his hand on the finger on the trigger when he shouldn't have had his finger on the trigger, and he reacted physically to something, and his gun went off. So you're saying
so you're saying it has nothing to do with race at all, even though that they had 3 months earlier they had the black targets in the exact same region, South Miami Beach.
Yeah,
so that's how they were.
I can't speak to an individual officer who might be racist. Like the Chicago where the cop shot the kid with a knife walking on the street, and that was covered up by Ron Emanuel for like 18 months. Yeah, that cop was straight up piece of shit. He was a straight up racist. He told his buddies he was going to shoot the guy before they even got on the scene. That was bullshit, right? Absolutely. The guy's going to jail for it. But in the vast majority of these situations, race has nothing to do with it. It's a situational thing. And they were just as likely to shoot a white guy as a black guy or a black guy as a white guy.
Okay, do you have any data that would buttress the idea that he would be just as likely to shoot a white guy as a black guy?
Actually, when it comes to percentage of crimes committed versus how they're represented in the public, you know, like the percentage, black guys 18 to 34 are 3 to 4% of the population, and white guys of the same age are roughly 35 or 40% of the population. White males commit generally, they're equally represented. They commit about 35 to 40% of the violent crime, whereas that black male population of 3 to 4% commits about 50 to 60% of the violent crime.
Well, hold on for a second, because I want to talk about that too. But the question I asked you was, do you have data that demonstrates that white unarmed males are being shot at the same clip percentage-wise that black people are?
Well, it has to be. You have to put it. You can't just do raw numbers. And you can't do representative, population numbers.
Isn't that what you just did? Isn't that what you just?
No. What I said was percentage of violent crimes committed.
That's what I'm asking you. So what I'm asking you is percentage of times unarmed men have been shot by race. Because you just did violent crimes committed by race, right? So just
right, because what that does is puts that population more likely to be in contact with police.
Well, yeah. If me and my white buddy are walking down the street and 8 times out of 10 I'm the one that's getting harassed by police, then I would be more in contact with police, right? I mean, we know that stop and frisk was obviously racially slanted in New York. That's unquestionable.
Because the majority of people committing crimes in those areas were black.
Yeah, isn't that circular logic though? Like, in other words, because the report.
If that's the case, you have to get into what actual, how police work happens. When you have patrol guys who do reactive policing, and then you have street crimes units that do proactive policing, and how proactive policing happens, and how these units that are specialized units that get assigned to certain areas, how that happens, and whether they're requested by the citizenry or whether they're there because of crime analysis says there's a spike in robberies in this area, so we're gonna they have lots of words for it, but they're gonna do directed patrol, we're gonna do swarm patrols in this area because there's a spike here. Those kind of things happen in every major city. I was part of a street crimes unit, and I was assigned to certain areas because of certain spikes in crimes, or because the neighborhood said this house is a bad house and there's lots of people coming and going and it needs special attention. So this unit gets assigned there for 2 or 3 weeks. And yeah, you're going to get the people that are, when it comes to the people who are committing the crimes, the majority of the people that are committing the crimes in those areas that are being targeted, that demographic is going to be stopped more. And I'm telling you, the last thing that the people of this country want is proactive policing to be stopped. Well, that's all that really stops.
Well, hold on for a second, because you still didn't answer my question. And if you don't have the data, that's okay, because I have it.
I mean, I could.
Let me ask you the question.
I'm telling you, unarmed white guys are being shot at the rate that they commit crime.
Let me ask you the question. I'm going to ask you again, because
yes.
Eric Garner wasn't committing any crime to warrant being killed. Neither was.
He was.
To warrant being killed is what I said.
No, of course not. But he was still resisting.
He was not. Well, first of all, they didn't put him under arrest. Did you see the video? See, this is what I'm talking about. If a police officer, and I've had these interactions with police officers, if a police officer comes to you,
I've been stopped and picked up by cops when I was a kid.
If a police officer, I'm talking about America now and our rights. If a police officer comes to you, you can tell that officer, "Give me my space. Let's have a conversation." This is not Stalinist Russia where we're supposed to bow immediately to the police force.
If an officer is doing a legal, what they call Terry stop, because they've got articulable suspicion to stop you because they believe a crime might be occurring, they then have the right to do a pat-down search, and you have to submit to a pat-down search. You have to put your hands on the wall. You have to submit to that pat-down search. If you resist that pat-down, it's called resisting arrest or detention. If you're being detained for a criminal investigation.
Did they say he was being detained? You saw the you saw the Eric Garner video? Did they say he was being detained?
When they were stopping him for the selling of whatever the CDs,
the Lucy cigarettes.
Right.
There he was on the street being a good capitalist, and here comes the NYPD.
No, when they approached him, they had the right to detain him for their investigation.
Did they say they were
they tried to resist that detention?
Did they say they were detaining him?
I don't think that. I'm going to watch the video again, but I don't know what the time frame was between when they stopped. They stopped him to get out with him to identify him.
Yeah, when they choked him to the ground and he was saying, "I can't breathe," they continued to choke him until he stopped moving.
Yeah, actually, when somebody's saying they can't breathe, they can breathe.
Well, in his particular, okay.
I know that's the truth.
So here's the disconnect, Elio, Mike. You made a statement that they would just as likely be able to shoot a white person as a black person, but you have no data to back that up.
Well, I'm going from my experience and from the trainings
that
we get.
Mike, you're a good guy, brother. But I'm not worried about your experience because I feel safe with you. The problem is that I've got situations where a guy's selling Lucy cigarettes and ends up dead. Another guy is on the ground with his hands in the air and ends up shot. The cop has zero explanation for why that is.
And then you have the white guy shot in the hallway at that hotel in Arizona.
But Mike, I can tell you the numbers are much different. And it's interesting to me that literally I can get you 20 examples to one where that's the issue.
No, you can't.
Okay. Okay. Well, hold on. Let me read. Can I read?
With the crimes committed.
Mike, let me read a source to you. I'm going to read this because I actually have source for, because I don't agree with your idea that they'd be just as likely to shoot a white guy, percentage-wise, as they would a black guy. This is, you can look this up yourself. This is published in 2018 of May 2018. Police killings hit people of color hardest, study finds. More years of life lost among blacks, Hispanics than there are of whites.
I would agree with that.
So it's called the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health. And this is done by Anthony Bowie and David Geffen School of Medicine at the University of California, Los Angeles. Okay? So it's not true statistically that we could make the argument that if they saw a white guy on top of the guy that they'd be just as likely to shoot him. The numbers don't tell us that. You're telling us that. You're telling us that, but the data's not telling us that.
No, I'm not saying that they are shot more. I understand that. But they're shot at a rate commensurate with violent crimes.
My brother, Eric Garner wasn't committing a violent crime. Mr. Kinsey wasn't committing it.
Taking anecdotes are irrelevant.
No. I'm marrying the anecdotes with the data that I just read you.
Well, I'm just going by the actual mass data of like all the instances.
Okay, quote them.
Just as many white dudes who were killed, unarmed white guys that were shot.
We're talking about percentage here, right? And you're making the argument that these people deserve to be killed because they're violent criminals.
I'm not saying that. No. I'm not saying they deserve to be killed.
Well, it's commensurate with the violence they're committing. The problem is that these examples, along with the numbers, are showing that these people were not committing acts of violence.
It's the demographic I'm talking about.
I don't care what the demographic is. They're not committing acts of violence, and they end up dead. They end up dead, Mike. What should happen to the guy that shot Charles Kinsey?
Say that again?
The dude that shot Charles Kinsey in Miami. What should happen to him? The one that shot him when he was on the ground with his hands in the air.
What happened to the officer? I don't know. I don't know the situation.
Well, the same thing that happens all the time.
Depends on the circumstances. If the officer doesn't know why he shot, that's absolutely negligence, and it's manslaughter.
Well, Well, thankfully, Mr. Kinsey didn't die. And
it's an attack assault, or it's assault with a deadly weapon. There's all kinds of. I mean, if the officer can't articulate why he fired, then that's it was obviously improper.
So let me ask you a question, Mr. The security guard that was killed, I think it was yesterday or the day before. The folks in the crowd were saying he's a security guard, and he was shot anyway.
Okay, well, what I can tell you is, okay, well, first off, we don't know what kind of information the officer was getting on while he was arriving, right? The last thing he could have got on the radio was there's some guy with a gun holding a guy down on the ground, and so that's what he was looking for when he got there. We don't know that. He could have, if he got information that there's a security guard holding the guy down, then yeah, he screwed up.
Wait, Mike.
He doesn't know. He didn't hear anything what those people were saying.
How do you know that?
It's such a chaotic and stressful situation that I'm sure he didn't hear what those people were saying.
Okay, Mike, is it possible that you have a bias because you're part of the law enforcement community?
Absolutely. And could this individual cop be a racist dude? Absolutely.
Well, I don't see. Here's my thing. I don't believe that a lot of these individual cops are racist. Like, for example, the dude that shot Charles Kinsey, who doesn't know why he shot him. I don't think that's because he's a racist. I think it's because he's been institutionalized to believe that black men are people that he should fear. I don't see any other explanation for why you'd shoot a guy lying on his back with his hands in the air, other than the fact that you've just been training at the range for 3 months, shooting at black folks, hearing stuff like this.
I'm saying white guys are shot in that same exact way.
Not at the same clip. I just provided the source to you. They're not shot at the same clip percentage-wise.
I don't think that source said was that more black guys are shot percentage-wise than white guys. That's all that.
How is that different from what I just said? That's literally exactly what I just said.
Doesn't mean there's any bias there.
Say again?
Just because the rates are different doesn't mean that there's any racial bias there. That doesn't go into the motivations of the shooters, of the officers at all.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So we've got empirical data that demonstrates that there is a vast difference between who gets shot when. We have video of black folks running with no weapons, the Walter Scott case, where the officer set himself up and shot the dude in the back. Let me ask you a question. If there was a systemic racial... If there was a system, that's because there was a video of it, Mike.
The forensic evidence on the scene would have proven that guy was.
I'm sure. I'm sure, because they also were seen trying to plant a gun on Walter Scott's dead body. I mean, come on, man.
That particular cop was, yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, Mike.
His taser on him.
If there was a systemic racial issue within the police department, what would constitute proof of it? Because what I'm getting from you is anecdotal evidence that we see on video doesn't prove it. Numbers don't prove it. So what would prove that there's an actual systemic racial issue in a police department?
Okay, if 3 or 4% of the population of so let's just say young black men were only committing like maybe 10% of the violent crime, but yet they were still being shot at 40 or 50% of the shootings. That would demonstrate it. If they were overrepresented in the shootings, then the rate of violent crime. You know what I'm saying?
Well, no, because like let me give you an example. I live in an area where I have numbers for this too, a predominantly white area, and they're not getting shot at those rates at all. And they're the only ones doing the crime. You and I both. Isn't it true that most violent criminals commit violent acts prior to their 28th birthday? Isn't that true? Most acts of violence are committed by people prior to their 28th birthday. Isn't that true?
Yeah, probably. I would agree with that.
Okay. So if I have 10 folks walking down the street and I channel my energy to a specific group of them, isn't it true that if I target them at a certain age range, isn't it true I'm more likely to find more violent people?
Sure, if you're going just strictly by age, yeah.
Right. So if I have a system, hold on, Mike. Give me a second, Mike. Give me a second. If I have a system where I'm targeting a specific group of people in exclusion, did you read the Stop and Frisk Human Rights Watch report, where you had white kids with cocaine that were passed up and black kids with weed that were getting harassed by police officers? Doesn't that prove that if you go after a certain group of young
officers were getting guns off the street?
Hold on, I'm just trying to make an argument here. Doesn't that prove that if you go after a certain group of young people, you're going to find it? So that would then be confirmation bias and justify your confirmation against that group of kids?
About the way that police work is criminal profiles, not racial profiles. And if they're going after a specific crime, they're going to go after the profile that fits that crime, the criminal profile.
I don't think you're understanding I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying.
If they wanted to pull cocaine off the street, then they would have stopped those white kids way more if they were looking to just get cocaine off the street.
Very good.
That particular stop and frisk mission was to get guns off the street.
Let me.
So they went after the guns.
Let me ask you a question. The war on drugs. Who got incarcerated the most during the war on drugs? What group of people?
Oh, absolutely. Crack dealers did, absolutely. And it was mostly black guys.
Okay.
Without a doubt.
Why weren't we targeting cocaine?
Because invariably, cocaine as a drug caused way less violent crime than crack did in communities.
Oh.
And that's a fact.
Well.
And the black communities, the black community leaders were the ones who demanded these stiffer sentences because they saw the devastation that crack was causing in their communities.
Wait a second. Wait a second, Elio, Mike. What you're telling me is that cocaine is generally trafficked by white folks, right?
I don't know if that's actually true. It might be used by white folks more, but I don't know if it's generally trafficked by white folks.
Well, you just gave the analogy earlier. If you're going after weed, you're going to get a black guy. If you're going after cocaine, you're going to get a white guy. Isn't that what you said?
But these are users, might not be dealers.
Okay. So then the war on drugs. Do you know between weed and cocaine in the 80s who got hit up more?
I guess I don't know the numbers on that. No.
Yeah, we went after weed with reckless abandon, even though it's not even remotely close to the destructive influence of a drug that cocaine is. So now
I would debate that severely.
You would debate that weed is worse than cocaine?
I would say it's probably on par with it.
Weed and cocaine are on par.
On the crimes that are committed extenuating from the dealing of or the buying of.
All right.
Probably more crime is committed because of pot being sold or bought than coke being bought or sold. Just crime in general.
Well, but don't you see what's happening? If I have a demographic of people who are trafficking in cocaine and I don't go after those people, wouldn't that then follow that their criminal records would be much lower than the people that I am going after?
Well, yeah, but when I was
okay, stop. Just give me 2 seconds. So I have a group of people that I'm specifically targeting, and their crime rates go higher. And then I have another group who I'm specifically not targeting, and their crime rates go lower. And then you justify police violence by saying, well, that crime rate is higher than that one, and that's why they're being disproportionately killed.
That crime rate. I said that violent crime rate. Murders, rapes, and robberies.
Are you saying that there is a vast difference between a disenfranchised people and violence? If you have higher rate. What you're telling me is that we have police officers who are specifically targeting certain types of drugs that we know are going to hit a certain demographic of people, and not looking at other drugs. This literally is the first time in history I've never heard anyone say that cocaine and weed are equivalent. I've never heard anyone say that cocaine and weed are equivalent. You're literally the first human being that's ever told me that.
Cops will tell you that all day long.
I've got a cop right next to me. Hold on. I've got a cop right next to me. He's at Camp Lejeune. Hey, are cocaine and weed like literally the same thing to you?
No, they're not.
Okay, sorry, Elio, Mike. My Camp Lejeune NP brother disagrees with you.
Well, then maybe it's not that way on a base. But I'm talking in a city when it comes to like car burglaries committed, shoplifting's committed, driving high. I mean, there's more crime is committed branching from the use of pot than it is from the use of cocaine.
All right,
Absolutely.
if you say so all the violent crimes increased in Colorado then.
I'm not talking about violent crime. Where did I say violent crime?
I'm sorry. I thought you just made a correlation between violent crime and marijuana.
I did not do that.
Robberies and all that stuff.
Crime in general. Okay, wait. The robbery, homicide, and rape thing is the rate that the young black male population is doing at a much higher percentage.
Yeah, because you put all their dads in jail for weed when you knew that it wasn't. Well, according to you, it's just as bad as cocaine. I don't know, bruh.
I'm talking about its reach into the community as far as the kind of crime that it causes in a community. Cocaine use or the sale of powdered cocaine causes way less of a criminal reach in a community than
because the police aren't Elio, Mike, it's because the cops aren't wreaking havoc on. Mike, stop. It's because the cops are purposely not wreaking havoc on those communities and separating families like you've done in the 80s with weed.
No.
Why don't you understand that?
I'm not talking about targeting the drug. I'm not saying going after a pot user or going after a cocaine user. I'm talking about going out and finding burglaries, getting burglars that are committing burglaries, and you break into cars, stealing cars, sticking up stores, shopping stores. I'm not talking about targeting the drug. I'm talking about going after the crime. And when you find out that a person is doing it because they're trying to get pot money or because they're high or they just have, that rate is much higher with pot than it is with coke.
Okay, so we just so then wouldn't it stand to reason that we would find, and Elio, Mike, and I are friends. I mean, we're good friends.
Absolutely.
We chat back and forth. Okay, so he and I are good, but when you're good friends, you can have one of these things.
Absolutely.
Mike, based on what you just said about the byproduct of weed, shouldn't we see a rise of all those types of crimes in Colorado then?
Well, that's a whole different story when it's being sold legally.
Oh, okay. So hold on. Stop. I gotta stop. I gotta stop you there. Hold on. Let me think this through. What you just told me was, if it's legalized, then the crimes, the violent crimes that you just talked about as a byproduct of it, well, the robberies and all the other terrible societal effects, right? What you're saying is, if it's legalized and there isn't a police intermission or infringement on the populace, then those crimes still are not existent, is what you're saying.
No, I'm not saying they're not existent. I guess when it's, well, I don't even know. When it's for sale at a dispensary, is it cheaper than when it's sold on the ground? I don't know how that works.
It's more expensive at the dispensary, actually.
Okay. But it's easier to get to, right?
Yeah, it's easier to get to in the hood too.
What it comes down to is when people, from my experience and from a lot of experience that people have, when the drug is really wanted, but it's hard to get, either it's expensive or it's only a few people have it, and the people that really want it will do anything to get it, and they commit lots and lots of crimes to get the money to get that drug. Whether or not, if it's easier and they can get it at a dispensary, that means that they're not going to go break into those cars for to get that extra
Mike,
20 or 30, 40 bucks. I don't know. I don't know how, because I don't know how the market works for legal versus illegal.
Mike, Mike, let me present something to you. Give me 2 minutes. I'm gonna present something, then you present something, then we'll go to the next caller. You have the last word as the guest. Your justification for why there's a disproportionate, it's undisputed that there's a disproportionate amount of black folks getting mowed down by police. Your justification was that we commit more violent crime. We then started talking about the war on drugs in the 80s, where you conceded that cocaine is generally a white traffic drug and weed is generally a black traffic drug. And we were...
No, I didn't concede that.
You said if we went after weed, you'd get the black kid, and we went after coke, we'd get the white kid. Didn't you say that?
Okay, that's users, not dealers.
Whatever. Didn't you say that?
What I said was, I was only specifically looking at that one. You talked about the stop and frisk thing, right? And you said that they let a lot of white kids go, and those kids had coke on them.
All I
was pointing out that one instance, if that particular unit was being assigned to get coke, they would have probably stopped a lot more of those white kids.
Right? It's very convenient.
Across the country, I wouldn't necessarily say that powder cocaine across the country is.
What's interesting to me is the behaviors that white folk are generally statistically known to commit are decriminalized, or not as criminalized or not as targeted as certain black behaviors. My only point was, if you get a group of 10 people and they're below 28 years old, you're going to get a knife, you're going to get weed, you're going to get something. If you're looking hard enough, you will find it. And in the 80s, the black community was absolutely ravaged by crack. I agree. A whole discussion has to be had about how the hell crack entered the black community in the first place.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we put crack in the black community. Then we go after weed, and we make marijuana possession the worst thing on the planet. We go and disenfranchise an entire community of people, separate them from their families, completely destroy them.
Yes.
And
I would have to debate. I'd have to debate that marijuana is the worst thing on the planet.
No. I'm not saying. No, I know that marijuana and cocaine are apparently equivalent.
It varied state by state because it wasn't considered that way where I work.
Isn't that convenient? Where'd you work? In the 80s? Were you around a bunch of black folk in the 80s?
In the late 80s, early mid 90s.
Okay. I think you're proving my point for me, and you don't realize it. But here's what I'm saying. So in the 80s, you disenfranchise a whole group of people. You separate them from their families. And then when you have a whole generation of people who react violently to that, you go, well, we're killing you at a disproportionate rate because you're more violent. Meanwhile, you just said that when you decriminalized marijuana in Colorado, it would then not carry the terrible byproducts that we saw in the 80s and 90s. And
I'd have to see the stats on whether or not those kind of property crimes are still happening to pay for pot. I don't know if they are or not. I can't answer that.
And you don't see a systemic issue here, because all these policies that I just elucidated.
I see issues with the drug war and all that stuff. How that absolutely what the motivations were back in the 80s and 90s on why they cranked up the sentences on crack versus the other sentences.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of
and then Bill Clinton's 3-strike rule.
Again, that came directly out of the black leadership.
Well, hold on for a second. The black leadership has also been asking for reparations. You're not seeing Bill Clinton give reparations, okay? I don't want to hear it. What I'm saying, it's not like, come on, bro. It's not like white politicians are going, well, shit, those black people, they're asking for stuff. We got to give it to them. Please.
No.
Please. What the black community was doing was saying, our community is completely trash right now because somehow mysteriously crack was introduced into our system. You got fathers getting 20-year sentences for weed, right? And what I'm saying is, now we have a historical context. And now you're saying, well, I mean, you guys are just committing crimes at a higher rate, more violent crimes. When you know very well that you're looking at a certain group of people. Say again?
They still have to take responsibility for their actions. They can't just react.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
If you can't just do it. Oh shit! Because we're being treated bad.
Hey, my brother, I agree. If you're a cop and you shoot, you shoot the shooters and you don't shoot the no-shoots, right?
Absolutely.
There should be accountability for you then.
And there is.
No, there isn't. No, there isn't.
Well, it depends on circumstances.
There's been
go to jail all the time for those kind of things.
They do not go to jail all the time. What are you talking about all the time?
I can name a dozen of them in the last couple of years. But
all right.
There are defenses for if there's a bad shoot, but they can state the information that was provided to the officer and his state of mind. Yeah, there is a defense for some of those situations. People might not like the defenses, but that's the law. But these officers also are getting put in jail for these things as well.
Okay, Walter Scott. If we didn't have a video of that, they would have planted that gun on Walter Scott, and he would have concocted some story. He would have got out. You know what?
He did concoct a story, but
there was a video.
His story
Mike,
didn't fit the forensics on the scene.
It had nothing to do with the forensics. It was the video, Mike.
No, I believe that he probably would have been convicted otherwise.
Okay, you're just not thinking, bro. I disagree with you. Okay, all right. You have the last word, because this is what we do in Middle America, ladies and gentlemen. We can disagree stridently, but I believe the best of Mike, and Mike believes the best of me. Mike, you believe the best of me, don't you?
Of course, absolutely, 100%.
I believe the best of you too. You have the final say, my guy.
Final say. I guess there's these officers that ever get. I guess there are the occasional officer that is such a douchebag that, yeah, maybe he is going out and purposely deciding to shoot somebody. And that's, but the vast majority of these situations are just chaotic, crazy situations that are happening a million miles an hour, and there's no racial bias, there's no decisions to violate this person's civil rights. This shit just happens at a million miles an hour, and yeah, sometimes there's screw ups, but I really don't think that there's a major bias that causes the vast majority of these shootings to be based on race. Whether a couple of anecdotes here and there were, absolutely, I would agree that they are.
Okay. One last thing. Are you voting for Hillary 2020?
Excuse me?
Are you voting for Hillary 2020?
I hope she fucking runs. It'd be hysterical.
All right, man. Much love to you, brother.
Either that or Creepy Joe Biden, because if he runs, that would be the absolute best.
I feel like no. I think Biden would have a better chance than Hillary in spades.
Not when you get all the videos of him feeling up kids.
Right. Yeah. I know. Yeah. They're just lying, and plus all the other ones that haven't been released yet that I'm sure the Republican National Committee is just sitting on.
You know, because Trump would call him Creepy Joe all day long. That's all he'd be known as.
Yeah.
Creepy Uncle Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of like a Trump light, only not as much conviction, I guess. All right. All right, my brother. I love you. Have a good one.
Love you too, man. Bye.
Elio Mike, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why we have Middle America. You can disagree. You can agree to disagree. You can disagree stridently. This is what we do. Okay. We got room for one more caller.